to the 14th episode of the Geeky Pastimes podcast. I record this every weekday at 9 a.m. on youtube.com/Geeky Pastimes, but you can also obviously find the VODs as soon as I've finished. And then normally about a day later, I upload it to various podcast services. So listen to it where you want, but just make sure you follow, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And if you want to become a member of the channel, it's only $1.99 a month over on YouTube. And you get some, little icons and emotes and things like that. But you also get to support me and keep me doing this. So thank you very much to everyone that already has. Like Rubberdog, who became a Tier 1 member, which is £5 a month, just before the stream went live. So thank you very much to him. Now, I don't want to waste any more time, so let's get on with today's news. Now, we've got at least kind of 4 big news stories, I would say, today. And the first one is something that I'm excited about, and I feel like I might be slightly alone in being excited about this, but that is that Disney Speedstorm, which is a new kind of kart racing game from Disney. I've played it in one of the betas, and it's very much like Sonic All-Stars Racing, I would say. It feels more like that than it does Mario Kart. It doesn't feel quite as kind of, I don't know, Mario Kart feels a little bit slower, a little bit more deliberate in kind of how you move around other enemies and use the items and stuff like that. Disney Speedstorm does feel like it's much more about going fast. But it's super fun. I find it a lot of fun. You got characters from Monsters, Inc. and Pirates of the Caribbean and obviously Mickey and Minnie Mouse and a bunch of others. I think like maybe Elsa's in there as well. If you're a Disney fan, if you're a Disney Parks fan and Rides fan, or a Disney Movies fan, I think there's a lot to like about it. It's only coming out today for people that buy the Founders Packs. They're calling this like early access, so they're going to keep on adding stuff, changing stuff. It is going to be free to play later in the year, so at some point it's going to come out free to play. So if you want to wait to try it out when it's free, obviously do that. But if you want to play it today, you will be able to. I think it's like 11 o'clock UK time. So in a couple of hours, it should be coming out. But I'm very excited about it. I'm kind of hoping that they'll send me one of the Founders Packs for it, but I'm kind of thinking I might buy it anyway, just because I'm really excited to play it. If I do get it today, I will be streaming it later today over on twitch.tv/Geeky Pastimes. So I'm really excited. I really like kart racers. I think they're a lot of fun to play, especially if you can get a group of friends together. They're awesome fun. So yeah, really hoping that we get to do something with that. Then the second news story is that the Pokemon Go developer Niantic has announced Monster Hunter Now, which apparently is just like launching today. It's just coming out, or maybe yesterday, I'm not really sure. This is kind of interesting. Like when Pokemon Go kind of took over, what was that, 2018, 2019? It was huge. Like, it was crazy seeing people who don't really play video games normally walking around out in the sunshine. It was a beautiful summer that year. Everyone was just walking around, catching Pokemon. You'd see big groups of people on their phones, like, swiping to grab the Pokemon. I absolutely loved it. I thought they did a really good job of the sort of opening of that game. I eventually got bored of it. I mean, I did play it for like a year. And, to the point where when I went on holiday, when I went to like other countries and stuff, it was like, oh, what Pokemon can we get in this country, like on this continent? And all of that stuff was fun. Eventually, I just kind of got bored of it. Before the pandemic and stuff like that, I think. I just got tired of it. But I remember there being loads of other copies of it. Like there was a Hogwarts one, wasn't there? Like a Harry Potter one. There was one that like was Jurassic Park, I think, with dinosaurs and stuff like that. I know Niantic had something before they made Pokemon Go that was like another kind of thing, something to do with portals and stuff. There were lots of different things that were tried. It was like, hey, can we do this, but for people who don't like Pokemon, for people who like a different franchise? So I find it really interesting that they've gone to Monster Hunter. I didn't know this was coming at all. I didn't know that this was a thing that had been announced. I don't know if it had been. But it's Monster Hunter's an interesting choice because I would say even with the success of Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise, Monster Hunter's still pretty niche. Like, normal people who don't play a lot of video games probably don't know what Monster Hunter is. I would argue a lot of people who do play a lot of video games have probably never played a Monster Hunter. I know it's bigger in Japan, like it's more popular over in Japan. And, I know there was obviously, they did a film of it, but I don't think the film did very well. Weirdly, we were talking about that film yesterday on the stream. But yeah, it's an interesting choice for sure. I can see how it works. The idea that, you go around your neighborhood, you find monsters. If you find one, you can go try and fight it with your character. So I'd imagine it's much more like you're building up your character rather than in Pokemon Go, you're building up a collection. So that's a kind of interesting twist on it. It's definitely interesting enough that I will give it a go. especially if it is available to download today, because then I'm going away this weekend, and it means I can do something when I'm in queues for roller coasters. I can sit there and, play Monster Hunter. That sounds like a fun time. I can't imagine this is going to last. I can't imagine this is going to do that well. When they couldn't really get like the Harry Potter thing to work, and Harry Potter is obviously a massive franchise, the idea of doing essentially the same game but with Monster Hunter, that seems dubious at best to me, like that one's odds. But anyway, kind of interesting. And then the next news story, and this is something that a lot of websites and podcasts and stuff have made a big deal of. I'm not convinced it is a big deal, personally, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, because it kind of leads on to a slightly different topic that's maybe more interesting. That is that Joseph Staten, who is the guy who's like one of the original Halo people, there's a group of people who have worked on Halo since the early days. They worked at Bungie, and then they ended up working at 343. He's one of them. He's become the creative he's left Bungie, or not Bungie, 343, left Microsoft, and now he's gone to go work for Netflix, and he's now the creative director on a new AAA multi-platform game. They've said it's a new IP, it's an original IP, and yeah, Netflix apparently have been spending a load of money building up their game studios because they want to get into gaming. Now, there's a few interesting things in this. First of all, the fact it's Joseph Staten. So this is something that I've talked about a few times on the podcast already, even though we're only 14 episodes in, that there seems to be a big trend over the last 10 years or so of developers from franchises that were very successful and maybe have had a couple of missteps lately. So Battlefield, Halo, Call of Duty, leaving and then going to found other studios. And they often come out and say these studios are AAA studios. They often come out and be like, I'm starting up a new AAA studio. I'm working on a new AAA game. And we've seen this, countless times. And other than Respawn, who went on to make Titanfall, I can't think of a single time it's worked. I can't think of a single time where the game they've talked about has come out and been successful and been a big deal. I'm sure there's probably a couple of other examples. But I would say so far it seems to be a lot of kind of promises and bluster. And then it turns out that one person or a small group of people from a bigger team that made a game can't necessarily recreate that success. I'm not sure if it's them overestimating how much of the game's success was their responsibility, which I know definitely has happened and sometimes. Like, I definitely think that sometimes I think I shouldn't start drama on these podcasts, but I don't know. We don't have a huge audience. I think it's probably fine. Midnight Society. There's a lot of stuff about, what's the guy's name? Robert Bowling? Robert Bowling being like, a big deal, being, I think he's studio director or creative director or something for Midnight Society, working on that Dead Drop game. And if you look at his LinkedIn page and stuff, he says things like he was responsible for the success of like Modern Warfare 2 and stuff like that. And it's like, as far as I know, when that game came out, he was like a community manager. And then later on, he ended up doing some design work, but it seems very nebulous as to what he was actually doing on the Call of Duty games. And then he left, and then he had a string of like, working on like nothingy mobile games and stuff like that. And then he ended up working on some game that got cancelled before it came out. And it's like, I don't think you could say that he is responsible for the success of Call of Duty. Like, maybe at the time Call of Duty was doing quite well, he was one of the more public-facing roles. He was someone that the fans got to see. He was someone that they got to put his face to the game. But that doesn't mean he was responsible for its success. And now he's gone on to, another studio, and he's saying, well, this game's obviously going to be successful because we've got this guy who worked on Call of Duty. And it's like, but he also worked on a bunch of unsuccessful mobile games and another game that got cancelled. Like, what about those, which are his more recent history, his more recent CV, I guess, resume. And that seems to be the thing a lot of time. Also on Midnight Society, I've talked about, we've got developers from Halo Infinite, and a lot of them are environment artists. And it's like, yeah, the environments in Halo Infinite are probably one of the worst parts of that game. Like, if you dig a little bit under the surface of some of these announcements, and it might be that, Robert Bowling didn't want to make those kind of announcements. It's more of like a marketing thing. He didn't want to present himself in that way, taking more credit than maybe he deserves, because it's like, it's just a way of like getting investment in a studio and stuff like that. It might just be a business thing. It might not be him personally. And I think that's kind of something that a lot of these studios have, is like they talk about these people as if, as if it's like a film director. If you've got, there's certain directors who make films who I will go see their films because it's them directing it. So, someone like Edgar Wright, someone like, trying to think of other people who I would definitely go see their films, whoever it is. Like, there used to be people like Taika Waititi or Tim Burton, but I wouldn't go see their films anymore because they've let out a few rubbish ones lately. Even people like J.J. Abrams or Michael Bay or James Cameron, it's like there's a temptation to be like, yeah, it'll probably be a fun time. I know what to expect. I kind of know what's going to happen. And that's, I think, because in the film industry, a director has so much say over what the film ends up becoming, has a sort of a hand in editing and casting and choosing the script and all of that sort of stuff. Whereas in gaming, I don't think there's many people who I would say have that kind of influence over a studio. You're looking at people like Shigeru Miyamoto or Hideo Kojima or Vince Zampella. Like, there's I would say there's probably less than 10 people in the gaming industry who, if I sat down and thought really hard, I could say, okay, if they're involved in a game, I'm probably going to give it a look. I'm probably going to... Ridley Scott's a good example, although I didn't like Prometheus. But yeah, like, there's not many game studio directors who I would say, okay, like, whatever they do is going to be, like, authentically them. It's going to be something that I'm super interested in. But they keep using it as a marketing thing. They keep saying, like, from the creators of, like, whatever. And it's like, nah, there could be, like, one person who did, like, a tiny bit of work on it for a month. You don't know. It could be a voice actor or something. It could be someone who had no say in the creative direction of the game. So when Netflix are saying, hey, Joseph Staten is working on this AAA multi-platform title, that brings to mind, like, oh my God, are Netflix going to have the next Halo? And it's like, but it should probably bring to mind, like, oh, Netflix going to have the next Halo Infinite? Because that's less exciting, isn't it? Like, that's less interesting. It's still interesting that Netflix are doing AAA games. A lot of people, I think, still don't know. I would imagine lots of you probably have a Netflix subscription and don't realize that if you load up the Netflix app on your phone, you can get a lot of proper games, like really good games, like highly regarded indie games for free as a part of your Netflix subscription. Check them out. There's some awesome stuff on there. Really cool stuff. So they have been like dipping their toes into games, but creating games, and particularly creating like multi-platform games, that's a kind of new thing. That's a kind of interesting thing. It's also, I think, maybe a red flag for it is that you can look at what Google and Amazon have done, massive companies trying to create game studios. Google with Stadia, Amazon made, the studio that made New World. They didn't really make Lost Ark. They just kind of bought that, but that was a thing. They made that game, what was it called, like Crucible or something, that ended up coming out, then going back into beta, then getting cancelled. They've had a lot of failures. Like, a lot of stuff has gone wrong for them. And so it's, like, interesting to think of, like, what's Netflix going to be able to do differently? Like, obviously, it's been very firmly established that creating a new AAA studio is very, very hard. A lot of the successful AAA studios are those studios that have basically been an old studio and have developed over 20, 30 years and slowly built up to being able to do what they can do now. There's not many studios that just get created as a AAA studio and then suddenly do well. I mean, even if you look at like what Microsoft has done, when Microsoft a few years ago announced that they were creating loads of studios and they created the initiative to make the Perfect Dark game, we haven't heard anything about that, but we've heard that lots of people who were working on it have quit since then. We know that there were EA studios making, like, new studios were created to make new Star Wars games, and a lot of those ended up getting cancelled. Going back to Microsoft, actually, like, obviously, they've kind of got those new teams, like the people at Playground who are making Fable, and Fable's kind of disappeared for a long while. The Rare team that were making Everwild. There's a lot of things where it's like companies have tried to either expand or make a new studio, and they're companies with a lot of experience in the gaming space, and they've still failed or seem to be failing. The idea that a new well, not a new company, but a company that's kind of new to the industry could do it, it's not impossible, but I think it's unlikely. I think I wouldn't be expecting this new Netflix Joseph Staten AAA game. I wouldn't expect it to be a AAA experience. I'd expect it to be something like Outriders, like that kind of level. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I almost think like that's something studios should look into when they're a new studio. Like, hey, maybe don't go straight into the most ambitious game straight away. Maybe make something that's playing it a little bit safer, has some kind of interesting hook, but is like something that's achievable and won't take 20 years to create. Maybe do that and then see how that goes. And then, you know how you're working together, where your areas of strength are and your problems and stuff like that, and your needs and how you need to grow before you move on to a bigger project. I feel like that would make a lot of sense. I'm always a little bit disappointed that more studios don't do stuff like that, because I always think we get really interesting games. When you have like quite a big studio making a slightly smaller game, or a much smaller game, you get some really cool stuff. Like Obsidian made Pentiment. That was a really cool game and something really very different. You have, what was I going to say? Rockstar, when I made Rockstar Table Tennis. Super interesting, super strange. And it's like, I'm sure there was an interesting story as to why that came about. But it probably did them a lot of good. I mean, obviously, Rockstar are a very good company. Like, was that just them testing their animation tech? Because that's kind of what it seemed like. If they did a very good job, because the animation in GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2 is like, top tier, best in class. So, super interesting when they do stuff like that. Right now, I did read a comment where it's saying, hey, maybe I should go back and read through the comments as I go through topics rather than just waiting till the end and getting all confused. So let's do that. Alpha said, do we count Bungie themselves going solo for Destiny? I'm not sure it would, because that studio I don't think has changed that much. I know that, like, a lot of the staff left Bungie when they moved away from Microsoft and they moved away from Halo, because a lot of those staff went on to 343 because they wanted to carry on working on Halo, or Microsoft paid them a lot of money to do that. But Bungie itself have kind of stayed as one company through their days of Activision, then going independent as Bungie, then getting bought by Sony. It still is very much Bungie. And Bungie, again, Bungie, another one of those studios, have been around forever, back in the days of Marathon, back in the days of making Halo as a real-time strategy game for the Mac before Microsoft bought it and wanted it to turn into a first-person shooter. It's like super interesting. You look at like a lot of these studios that are successful right now, you can trace their roots back to a company that was making games in the 90s. I'd be really interested, like, what sort of studios are actually new, other than Respawn? Like, Respawn are the ones that stick in my mind, of Respawn are a new studio. They made Titanfall, and before that, obviously the developers had been working on Call of Duty and stuff like that, but they branched off, made a new studio, and made something amazing. I don't know how many studios there are like that immediately went into AAA gaming and just nailed it, just made an amazing game. I'd be interested to hear examples. I'm sure there must be some, I just don't know them. Gunslinger said, cancel culture at its finest, just because it's changing doesn't kill it. FFS. He's talking about the title of the video and not understood what we're going to be talking about with that. So maybe just wait, Gunslinger. Hold your horses a little bit. Hold your anger before you start ranting about cancel culture, although that sort of gives us an impression of what you might be like. But yeah, like, wait until we get to that conversation maybe before you start jumping to getting frustrated about what you think is being said. Hey Matt, hope it's good. It's like, it's there, it's the title, FML. It's like, Jesus, chill, man. Calm down. Madago said, Modern Warfare 2 was a big change in the franchise PC players. Back in the day, we had a clan and ran dedicated servers for the OG Modern Warfare. Then we had this COD that was peer-to-peer. Kind of sport I run. That's something a lot of people forget about the old days of first-person shooters in general, not just Call of Duty, but I remember it vividly being one of the big differences between Battlefield and Call of Duty. Was Battlefield, you had like dedicated servers that I know some people still ran servers on their computers, but in theory you had dedicated servers, so no one had an advantage. And then you had games like Halo and Call of Duty that used peer-to-peer servers, so one person in the game, and often they didn't know that it was them, were hosting that entire lobby on their console using their internet connection. And that meant that they had like 0 ping and they had an incredible advantage over everybody else. And it was just kind of, it was insane how much of a difference that made. And a lot of the games that people look back on like, oh, that was an incredible game, I loved multiplayer back then. It's like you literally had one person in every lobby chosen at random to be like the god player who could do incredible things, and everyone else had to struggle around it. It was very, very weird. Ken Levine with Bioshock. But that's, I mean, when they made Bioshock. That was a long time ago, wasn't it? I don't know how long ago Bioshock was. I'm going to Google it. But it was a long time ago. Let me have a oh, I can look at it on this computer, actually. Bioshock. So Bioshock was 2007, so that's 16 years ago now. It's pretty great. I mean, that's when it was released, so it made it about 20 years ago. But the team was 2K Boston. Oh, and it was 3 people from Looking Glass. So, yeah. That's interesting. So they made... Oh, and they made System Shock 2, Freedom Force, and SWAT 4. So it sounded like... Yeah, I mean, it sounds a little bit like it was Irrational. Yeah, so it was Irrational Games, and they made System Shock 2 in 1999. Then they just changed their name to 2K Boston when Bioshock came out. But that was already a pre-existing studio that just went for a name change rather than being a brand new studio. I mean, and like System Shock 2 is pretty cool. What was their first game? Oh, their first game was System Shock 2 in 1999. That's pretty impressive. Oh, but it was co-developed with another studio who had worked on like Ultimate Underworld. So yeah, like, I mean, again, I would say that's not a AAA studio going straight in and making something new. It was much more like it was an old studio that had just shifted around a little bit, a bit more like Bungie, maybe. Maybe you could say that's how that worked. Oh god, my chat just jumped sides. That was a bit confusing. Carrying on. Even the same AAA studios aren't the same. DICE probably said they have no idea what made Bad Company successful because so many of the original developers left. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's kind of interesting. It's the other edge of the coin, isn't it? That when we talk about, like I'm saying, you know, maybe don't put too much stock in one developer leaving or one manager leaving or something like that, thinking that they're going to be then able to go on and make the games that their previous company made. Because I don't think it works that way. You can also look at individual studios, and lots of people, you know, look at like Rare and are like, why aren't Rare making Diddy Kong Racing 2 or GoldenEye or Banjo-Kazooie or stuff? And it's like, because those people don't work at Rare anymore. Rare's basically an entirely new company. There's very few people who work there who previously worked on, you know, Conker's Bad Fur Day and all those games. And the same's true, yeah, like you're giving the example there of DICE, like, the people who work at DICE now aren't the people who worked on Bad Company. You know, it's a different team. To be honest, most of the people who work at DICE now don't seem to even be the people that worked on Battlefield 2042. Like, they seem like so many people left after that happened. And they got a lot of new people in. And obviously, they've got new management with Vince Ampella taking over there. I think there's lots of studios. You know, Infinity Ward, again, because of Vince Ampella leaving, are a completely different company to what they used to be. Treyarch, I would imagine, are probably a very different company to what they used to be. Raven definitely are. Like, I know a lot of the people who are higher up at Raven only joined during Warzone. Like, they didn't join, they weren't there for back in the old days of, like, Heretic and Hexen and stuff like that. It's like, you know, very rare that you can look at a game studio and be like, that is the same group of people. BioWare, another good one. Like BioWare, the 2 guys that founded BioWare. That weren't they doctors or something, the 2 people that founded BioWare. But the people who made the Mass Effect games and Dragon Age, stuff like that, they left the company. They went to, one of them went to go make a beer museum, which is super interesting. I saw them talking on stage just before they left, and they sort of announced that they were leaving. But yeah, sort of super interesting that, like, so many of these companies, people look and like, oh, this company's going to be good. Like, look at the amazing things they made back when. And it's like, but they're a completely different company now. Like, they are not the same people. They are not, it's not the same team. And sometimes that's a really good thing, you know, getting fresh blood in and fresh ideas and stuff like that. But a lot of the time, some of those creative people were incredibly instrumental and then left, and, you know, they were key to maybe keeping a company in check or having experience, even just having experience of how technology works. Like, you know, we had a phase in the last generation of lots of companies making their own engine. So like EA with Frostbite and Ubisoft with Snowdrop, of making these engines, and then key people leaving and the other people being like, we don't really know how this works anymore. Like, you know, having to use the documentation, which a lot of the time wasn't that good because people were working on the things that they'd created, so they didn't need it. There's lots of examples of like companies kind of being like, we have to use this because this is what the company's saying, this is how we're going to save money, but we don't really understand the intentions behind it. We don't really understand like the mechanics of it. And yeah, I feel like that must make it super hard for them. Hey, John C, thank you very much. Thanks for all the, he said, thank you for all the great videos. The New Bunks one's simple because of the mission, but still the first I've seen. Thank you very much. That was a really interesting video, actually. He's talking about a video I did yesterday that's doing quite well. Just about the new bunkers in DMZ. And I was taking a very different approach with it, where normally, as soon as someone talked about those bunkers, I heard someone talking about those bunkers like the day after the new season went up, maybe the day the season went up. So last Wednesday. And I was like, normally in the past, I would have been like, I need to rush, I need to get in there, find the bunkers, take a video of them, do a thing talking about them. And instead, I just decided to wait. I was just like, oh, I'll get there eventually. I'll like, when I see them, when I interact with them, then I'll make a video. And because I waited and then I got to the tier 3 mission where you actually use them, so I could talk about them in context and about what they're about. And I'd had that creators call where they talked a bit about there being something underground in DMZ. Like I had a lot more context and I could make a video where I wasn't rushing. I wasn't trying to get it out as fast as possible. I just made a video that I thought was good instead and kind of interesting. And I had some decent gameplay to put with it rather than rushed gameplay of me just looking at something then moving on. The video was much better. So it's kind of, I'm definitely getting more into that with Call of Duty of not being worried about being the first to do stuff, but instead just trying to make something that's a bit more entertaining and a bit more informative. And I think that's working well. I mean, the views are up, so that's good. Even Respawn aren't new. You can trace them back to the Medal of Honor games. Yeah, I mean, but aren't Respawn, weren't they created by the people leaving Call of Duty? Vince Ampero and that leaving Infinity Ward and then going and making Respawn. But yeah, anyway. Peer-to-peer for that saw a rise in cheaters, Madago. Oh yeah, I mean, that's another thing. And that's one thing. When Modern Warfare 2 for Call of Duty was first announced, you know, the Modern Warfare 2 2022 version, and people were like, yeah, it's going to be amazing, because Modern Warfare 2 was like the best time for gaming. It's like, I think a lot of people are looking with incredibly rose-tinted glasses back at that time, where there were loads of people cheating on console. Like, that was a really common thing, was to get into a hacked lobby, where they would reset all your progress, or make you, like, Prestige 500, or kill everyone in a lobby instantly. On top of the incredible, like, balance problems and stuff like that. That game was a nightmare online. Like, it was definitely, people had fun with it, but it got incredibly broken incredibly quickly and just didn't really ever get fixed. It's like still kind of a mess to play. It's a bit weird. Right, now people are starting to move on to the next topic. I've caught up. So the final thing I wanted to talk about, actually coming on to Bungie a little bit. The final piece of news for today, before we get on to the main topic, was an update on the Destiny leaker scandal. So I talked about this last podcast a little bit about the idea, you know, someone had been going into the Destiny creator calls and leaking everything, and then it all turned into a big drama where it turned out that it was this streamer called Ekagan, who's quite a big name in the Destiny community. Apparently, I didn't know who he was, but you know, I've been reading about it. He did a lot of like helping people through Grandmaster content, like the hardest content in Destiny. He's like streamed Destiny for like 20,000 hours or something. You know, he's like a big streamer within it. And it turned out he'd been in these criticals and no one knew it was him. Bungie never named him publicly, but then he went and did an interview with Paul Tassi for some reason, who's this guy who writes about games for Forbes, but he does tend to focus on Destiny because he plays a lot of Destiny. And so he talked about it. He went and talked about it on with Paul Tassi, and that meant that he was like named as like, hey, this is the guy that got banned because of everything that was going on. And then like he came out saying like, no, they got it wrong, like I was framed, maybe it was like, you know, they've said apparently it's all to do with, there's some screenshots where they see the leaker's desktop and he has the same icons and setup as this guy does, as Ekagan does, and he's like, no, I've been framed, it's not me. And then Bungie have come out being like, oh no, we've reviewed everything and it is irrefutable evidence. We've seen videos, we've seen chat transcripts, we've seen pictures. We know for sure it's this person. We are not going to do anything with them in future. They are banned from all Bungie titles in future. Like, that's it. And it's kind of, it's weird to see a company just like focusing on one person and just being like, no, this person leaked stuff, they are out. They didn't name them. Again, Bungie have never named a person. They're not doing that. And they're not trying to like publicly shame them. But they are being quite transparently like, this person was leaking stuff. We cannot stand that. Get rid of them. I would love it. I would absolutely love it if other companies did that. If EA outed the people who were leaking stuff for Battlefield 2042 when that was coming out. If Call of Duty outed the people who have been leaking stuff to, you know, Tom Henderson and Ghost of Hope and stuff like that. I would just, I'd love it if they were just like, yep, they get lifetime bans. We found their accounts. They are banned forever for leaking stuff. As someone who doesn't like leaks, I'd be super happy about it. I mean, obviously then people would start being like, but didn't you used to data mine stuff? Wouldn't you be banned? And it's like, yeah, possibly. possibly. I would say I was very open about that with them. I said to them, like, as soon as I started data mining stuff, I emailed Activision, like I had like a contact with the UK Activision people, and I was like, hey, so I'm making videos about this, I'm posting stuff about this on Twitter, like, is this going to mess up my chances of working with you in future? And they always just replied, being like, oh, we don't really know what you're talking about. Like, they didn't want to acknowledge it, they didn't want to talk about it. So it was like very much like they didn't care. I was always of the opinion, if they ever said, yeah, please stop doing that, I was just going to stop. Then I ended up stopping by myself anyway after a couple of months. But yeah, it's kind of, this way Bungie's coming down on them now, it's like, I'm quite happy about it. I'm pretty, yeah, it is very different. Data mining is different from leaking content and calls. I would agree, personally, because it benefits me probably. But definitely, I think it's an interesting thing. I thought it's an interesting thing. Anyway, going past all that, let's get on to the main topic of today and the title, which has apparently already made a couple of people angry in chat. Should Call of Duty die? So, what I'm talking about in this is something that I tweeted about the other day, and I got more of a positive response to it than I expected, so I decided to talk about it on a podcast. And that is me thinking, am I kind of hoping for Call of Duty to die? Am I kind of hoping for Call of Duty to lose a bunch of money? And I think the answer is yes. Like, with all of this stuff, you know, with the pay-to-win stuff, with the player numbers going down on Steam charts, and with like people starting to get fed up with Warzone 2, the campaigns not being very good lately, like multiplayer not having enough support, CDL maybe not doing as well as it could have been, all of these various different problems, it started making me think, like, am I actually worried, you know, that Call of Duty is going to die? And I was like, not really. Like, I mean, I don't think it can. I don't think Call of Duty will die. It's been, as I've said many times, the best-selling game for 13 out of the last 15 years. And in those other 2 years, it was the second best-selling game. It's like, it's very unlikely that Call of Duty could die. But I think it would be a good thing if it did. Like, I genuinely think it would be a really good thing if Call of Duty got to the point where it wasn't the cash cow for Activision. It wasn't the thing that they could just rely on to sort of like fund everything else. And they had to find ways to innovate. I think that genuinely would be a really sort of positive thing, not just for Call of Duty, and I do think it would be a good thing for Call of Duty, but I think it would be a good thing for like literally the entire industry, or at least, you know, the FPS side of the industry. Maybe not literally the entire industry. I don't think it's going to affect like, you know, Candy Crush or whatever. But yeah, so I mean, the people in chat earlier who were getting very angry, I think were very much misunderstanding what we're talking about. But if Call of Duty failed, like if this year Call of Duty releases whatever they're going to release, you know, apparently they are releasing a game this year. As far as I know, we don't really know much about it. I don't want to know much about it. If you know about leaks and stuff, keep your mouth shut. But whatever it is they're releasing this year, imagine if it came out and it just bombed. If people were like, I bought Modern Warfare 2 last year and didn't enjoy it, didn't like the support for it, didn't like the new stuff they brought out for it. Lots of my friends have already stopped buying the new main Call of Duty games because they're like, well, I just play Warzone, so what's the point? Like, they bought Black Ops Cold War and felt like they'd wasted 60, 70 quid because they just didn't play it. They just played Warzone all year. And it's like, I imagine there's a growing number of people who feel like that, especially when multiplayer's not getting that much support. And, you know, there's a lot of kind of annoying stuff where it's like, you have to do this in Warzone or you have to do this in DMZ. I think there's probably a lot of people doing that. And then if the numbers are dropping off for Warzone as well, and I was talking to someone yesterday about DMZ, someone was saying about, you know, how many people are playing DMZ at a time. I genuinely don't think many people are playing DMZ. I think there's a lot of excitement around it from the people that are playing it. I think it's built quite a passionate, small community. But I think it's something like Zombies, where if you looked at, like, the overall percentage of people who have played Call of Duty this year, the number of people who have played DMZ, I would guess is very, very low, like less than 5%, you know, that kind of low. And then the number of people that are still playing DMZ regularly, I would guess is like 1%. Like, I genuinely don't think it has a massive community. And, you know, my only real evidence of this was two things. One, lots of mainstream news, gaming sites and stuff like that still don't ever really talk about DMZ. And two, the few times we've gone into a mission where we needed to do a mission where you had to do something weird with an enemy, so we decided to go in together to kind of cheese it, every time we've tried to do that, it's worked. Like, even if we've been doing it at peak times, weekends, school holidays, stuff like that, every time we queue up at the same time, we all get into the same game. And it's like, that implies there's not many people matchmaking at a time. Like, that implies that that's, like, kind of rare. And also, like, when I'm playing DMZ, there's been quite a few times where people I've killed or people who have killed me have recognized me, and that doesn't ever happen in Warzone. That doesn't ever happen in multiplayer. Like, no one knows who I am in those things. But in DMZ, I think the community is quite small, so a lot of people who play DMZ have probably seen my videos or seen my streams, so they kind of recognize the name and stuff like that. So it's, yeah, I think the DMZ community is very small as it is. I do genuinely think the Warzone Battle Royale community is shrinking, is getting smaller. I think Warzone Ranked will probably bring that back and resuscitate it, and it'll like do very well after that. But I think it's shrinking at the moment. It's like, imagine what would happen if this year the new Call of Duty comes out and it doesn't even make top 10. It just doesn't sell that well. Like, people don't want to spend, you know, games are getting more expensive, cost of living crisis and everything. People don't want to spend 70 quid on a new game. And people just don't bother. Like, imagine if it's, you know, something like it's Modern Warfare 3 instead of, you know, whatever. I don't even know what it would be, because Treyarch's game isn't until next year, which would be the next Black Ops game, I assume. So, and I doubt it would be a Sledgehammer game after they've only just made Vanguard. So, yeah, whatever it is, I can't, if it was something where they were like, it was very closely linked to this year's Call of Duty, then I can imagine people looking at it and being like, I didn't like this one, I'm just going to wait till the next one. And I think that would be really good, because that would force them, first of all, it would, let's talk about the effect it would have on Call of Duty. It would encourage them to do something different. It would encourage Activision to look at Call of Duty and say, okay, well, this path we've gone down of tying everything into Warzone, tying everything into like this similar kind of storyline, this similar kind of play style, similar kind of engine, mechanics, movement, all of that sort of stuff. Maybe that's not working. Maybe we need to do something different. Maybe we need to go back to the drawing board of Call of Duty, and they might actually try something different, which I think would be amazing for the game. And what that different thing could be, like, you know, who knows? It could be that they go all out on like, we're going to make a game that's got a much bigger focus on like stealth and taking stuff slowly. Or we're going to make something that's much faster and is like Doom or Titanfall or something. Or they could be like, we're going to go all in on Warzone and just like, get rid of the multiplayer side, get rid of the campaign, and just do like, okay, we're gonna go all in on Warzone and make it like its own game and not connected to anything else. They could be like, okay, we're gonna separate everything. We're gonna have a multiplayer live service game, a Warzone live service game, and a zombies live service game, and separate all three of those. That would be amazing. Like, there's so many opportunities there for changing stuff up that I don't think is gonna happen while the game's successful. Like, while the game's successful, their like best bet is to keep doing the same thing, isn't it? Stay on course. You know, if you've got a game that is making more money than nearly any other game, why bother trying to do something different? They will just stay the same and keep on going. And, you know, I think to their credit, the Call of Duty developers have done a lot of innovative things. You know, you look over the last few years, they introduced Gunfight of Modern Warfare 2019. That I thought was quite interesting. They did Warzone itself. You know, lots of people were like, oh, Call of Duty doesn't need a battle royale, it's just jumping on a bandwagon. Turned out to be a pretty good thing that they did make Warzone. They did Plunder, which was a very different game mode that other people hadn't seen. With Black Ops Cold War, they did Outbreak, that was something other people hadn't seen. They actually did loads of cool experimental stuff with fire teams I don't think many people played. But there's some really cool stuff in that, of having like multi-team modes, of having like lots of teams of three all competing on a big map. That was a lot of fun. They did, with Vanguard, they did Champions Hill. That was a cool idea that, you know, was really playing on the idea of spectating people doing fights. I thought that was kind of interesting and a fun twist on Gunfight, even if they never ended up supporting it. And then, you know, with Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 2022, they've done DMZ, which is, you know, quite a different take on the extraction shooter from anything we've seen before. So they are taking risks. They are trying stuff. But my problem is that all of it is kind of being held back by this insistence on tying everything to Warzone now. Everything seems to be kind of like, it's a cool idea, but it's held back by having to be tied to Warzone. Or it's a cool idea, but it's a bit blander, or it doesn't quite work because maybe they're being a bit too ambitious, maybe they're biting off more than they can chew, maybe they're pushing the technology a bit too far. You know, does Warzone need 150 players in it? Do you need to have a map as big as it is? Do you need to have 60 different guns? Do you need to have like, you know, 24 grips and tuning profiles for every single one? Like, I would argue that maybe Call of Duty could benefit from them just take like that failing, that model failing, and then being like, oh, okay, let's go back to basics. Like, imagine how good it could be if they just spend all of their infinite resources, not infinite, but their huge resources, and all of the studios, and they were just like, okay, we're going to start from scratch. We're going to make Warzone free, and we're just making Warzone. The engine is going to be developed just for Warzone. All of the guns are going to be tuned and sort of made just for Warzone, trying to do stuff that makes sense just for that game. All of the kind of animations and everything, the music, everything, the story is all just crafted only for Warzone. Like, that could be really cool. Or the same thing for multiplayer. Like, hey, we're going to take a step back. Warzone can be its own thing and stuff, but we're going to really craft like the best multiplayer game we possibly can, and not worry about making like huge maps that need to connect to Warzone in some way, not worry about making vehicles and stuff like that, because then they can use them in Warzone, but just make the best 6v6 game they possibly can, which, you know, is kind of what Ubisoft's been doing with X Defiant, and a lot of people are responding well to that. I just think like that kind of shake-up of Call of Duty doing badly for a year and then being like, we should do something different, could be really good for them. I think it could be really like interesting and something that would at least get me more interested in the thing. But anyway, aside from how good it would be for Call of Duty, think about how good it would be for other studios if there wasn't one first-person shooter that completely dominated the industry. Like right now, if any company is making a Battle Royale game, they've got to work out how are they going to get players away from Fortnite and Warzone and PUBG to a lesser extent. You know, games like Super People came out and loads of people were kind of excited about it. It did a few things differently. It had a few different ideas. They obviously had some missteps and some bad design decisions along the way, but it did some things interesting. But it was still trying to compete to get creators away from Warzone, to get them away from Fortnite, to get them away from PUBG and stuff like that. And if they had like less competitors, if there were people actively looking for a new game to play, if there were people who are fed up with Warzone and they want something new to play, suddenly games have an opportunity to get a population, to like get a healthy number of people playing, so it's a fun game and it's sustainable in the future and stuff like that. I mean, that's where X Defiant bringing out the beta this week was incredibly good luck for them. That it's like, hey, people aren't really happy with Call of Duty right now. People who play Call of Duty a lot are looking for other stuff to play, and then X Defiant shows up and it's like, hey, why not give this a go? And people are like, yeah, I think I will. I'll try it. If Call of Duty's doing very well, then people don't want to look for those other games because, you know, Call of Duty is one of those games, like we talked about with Freeman a few episodes ago, like a lot of live service games where it tries to take over your life. It tries to be as demanding as it can of your time. You know, they've done this they did that previous thing where it's like, hey, if you get 100 headshots of all of these different types of guns, then we'll give you a camo. So it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. It's going to take me a few hours, but it's fine. And now they're like, hey, you need to get some tokens to unlock these things. And then we'll give you a new operator skin if you get loads. And we'll give you a calling card if you get 1,000 of them. And people are like, oh, okay, well, I need to do this. It's like, there's a new battle pass. Make sure you get through the battle pass because you've paid for it. So you want to get all of the stuff out of it. It's like, oh, okay, I'll play 45 hours. And it's like, they're constantly trying to do stuff to take up all your time. So you don't have time to try other games. You don't have time to spend your attention and your time and your money looking elsewhere. If Call of Duty fails, suddenly there's like a gap in the market that other people can make an attempt to try. And we've seen in the past, you know, loads of really, really good, solid games, like Titanfall 2 being probably the best example, coming and going, where they were awesome games, but they couldn't pull people away from other games that they liked even more. You know, other games that were just sort of like they were more attached to or that they were more excited about, had a bigger name, a bigger following already. And like a lot of the time I see it with my group of friends where while there's some really cool, interesting games, we still end up coming back to Call of Duty because, you know, as a group, all of us have Call of Duty. All of us can play Warzone. All of us have been playing Warzone for a while and we know it. Getting people to try a new thing is much more difficult when there's an alternative that everyone knows and everyone's comfortable with and everyone's familiar with. So I genuinely think if Call of Duty failed this year, then whatever first-person shooters are about, you know, whether that's X Defiant, whether that's, you know, Heartland, I don't even know if that's first person, I don't think it is. Whatever other new things come about, maybe would have more of a chance, like maybe would have a possibility. There's so many games that come out like Quantum League, I was talking about the other day, where it's a really solid game, but if you go on Steam and you see like 12 people are playing it, you're not going to bother, are you? You're not going to bother trying that out if it's got no population. And while people are wrapped up in Call of Duty and Fortnite and whatever, that number of people isn't going to change. You know, like if right now, if someone was making a AAA shooter game, the only real way you can get a foothold. You've either got to make a game that is better and offers more content than Fortnite and Call of Duty, so you're competing against Epic and the insane amount of stuff they put out, or you're competing against Activision having 14 studios working on a series to like put content out all the time, or you've got to get a different audience. You know, you've got to go after a completely different audience, and that means making a game that's very different. You know, so like Counter-Strike 2, that's a very different audience to the Call of Duty audience. Tarkov is a very different audience to the normal Call of Duty audience. So there's like some opportunity there. But if you're making something that's a bit like Call of Duty, you're going to really struggle. Like, you're going to struggle to pull people away from it. And I think that's happened lots and lots of times, that games have unfairly died because Call of Duty is doing well, because Call of Duty kind of exists. It strangles the rest of the industry. And it's also like, I mean, it also means that model that Call of Duty is taking is very attractive to everyone else. You know, there must be a lot of other companies. When you look at all of the games that come out over the last year or two that have, you know, the new the Avengers game is a good example, or the new Kill the Justice League game. You look at those games and they have battle passes and they've got paid for cosmetics and they've got, you know, live service things, stuff like that. That's coming because loads of publishers are like, okay, you want this much money to make the game? Well, we've looked at Fortnite and Call of Duty, and they're making insane amounts of money by having a battle pass, by having lots of paid for microtransactions, by, you know, doing these things with multiplayer and stuff like that. And they're like, so do that in your game, because that's how you can make an insane amount of money. You know, you can make something like God of War Ragnarok and make a bit of money, but you can make 10 times as much money if you're selling battle passes and microtransactions, as long as it works. So try that, try to do that. And that means they're having to, like, everyone's making their games in the image of Call of Duty because it's so successful. And if that model failed, then people would start looking for new models. People would start looking for, like, other ways of doing things. Like, the similar kind of thing happened with the expansion passes for first-person shooters. Remember when you'd be playing Call of Duty with your friends, and then a new expansion comes out, and you've got to buy, like, a DLC pack. And if you want to play the new maps, if you want to play the new mode, if you want to use the new guns, you've got to pay 15 quid. But then you've also got to convince all of your other friends to pay 15 quid, and it splits the player base. And that happened with Battlefield, it happened with Halo, happened with Call of Duty. And then, you know, some of them started experimenting with, like, well, hey, what about if we just give all of these maps away for free, but then sell skins instead, and we sell cosmetics, and we sell battle passes instead? And, you know, one or two companies try it. Everyone else is like, yeah, that's making them way more money, because now everyone's coming to play the game. They're not having the player drop off that they used to have when DLC came out. It's not splitting the player base anymore. That's a much better model. Let's all do that. And then, you know, everyone does it. You need an old model to fail before new interesting things come out. And, you know, it would be interesting. I'm not saying it would even necessarily be better if Call of Duty failed. I'm more saying it would be interesting if Call of Duty failed. So that's my piece. That's my opinions on it. I think it would be a good thing for the industry, for gaming, and for Call of Duty if it kind of died. If it kind of had a shockingly bad year to the point where they couldn't carry on doing the same thing that they've been doing. That's my opinion. So I'm going to go back to chat and read what people have been saying. See how it's going. So, what are people saying? I don't want to, like, go over it. But if you've got any thoughts on that, if you've got any, like, questions, or you've got any ideas, please do put them in the chat, and then I'll read them out and talk about them. Michael Ward said he agrees. It would wake them up to get them back to where they were at the start. I mean, in some ways, like, you can't go back to where they were at the start of Call of Duty. Like, Call of Duty itself was a very innovative game. The first Call of Duty game did things that other games weren't doing, but now lots of games have done since. Like, they can't go back to that. And then even if you look at, like, Call of Duty 4 and Modern Warfare, that game, if you released it now, wouldn't do well. Like, that wouldn't be a successful thing. The thing that Call of Duty has done well is innovating. Like, the thing that Call of Duty's always done well, and I think very successfully, is pushing the genre forwards, pushing multiplayer shooters forward. Like, there was a long time, around the time, you know, Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops 2 and Black Ops 3 and all those sort of things came out, where loads of first-person shooters would come out and have multiplayer. Like, you know, Doom 2016 had multiplayer. Far Cry 3 had multiplayer. Lots of these games had multiplayer that no one ever cared about, because they were just still going into the whole, hey, you can just put a load of players on either side of a map and then get them to run at each other and shoot each other and kill each other, right? And Call of Duty was doing like kill streaks and weapon camos and progression and like operator skins and all of this sort of stuff. And they were trying lots of different things and different modes and things, while other companies were still just doing team deathmatch and capture the flag and domination. And it was like, I think Call of Duty constantly doing something new was the thing that always made them stand out and always made them exciting. You know, it was always exciting to play a new Call of Duty game because it's like, what's going to change? Like, what's going to go on? And that's still happening to an extent. It's just everything, I think, whereas it used to be like super divergent. You know, you think of like when you'd have Black Ops having like crazy zombies modes and then campaigns that had branching stories and optional objectives and stuff like that, and co-op and crazy things like that. And then the multiplayer having maps that would have like, you know, interactive elements on it and super interesting things and some crazy modes within multiplayer. Like all of these weird things happening, you know, Black Ops 4 having like giving up on the campaign but adding Blackout. Like crazy things being tried. And now I feel like everything's kind of merging in, where it's like Modern Warfare 2019, Black Ops Cold War, Vanguard, and Modern Warfare 2 2022 is all kind of getting to the point where it feels quite similar. Like when you play a new Call of Duty game, like you play Modern Warfare 2 22, it's like, oh yeah, I recognize basically everything in this. DMZ is the only thing that I would say seems unrecognizable compared to previous Call of Duty games. It's something completely different. Everything else about it, especially about the paid version of the game, feels kind of like stuff we've seen before, just a, you know, new lick of paint on it. The campaign didn't feel like it was doing anything particularly interesting. The multiplayer definitely didn't feel like it was doing anything interesting. We didn't get gunfight until season 3, and now it's just the same gunfight we had at the beginning, at launch for Modern Warfare 2019. Spec Ops, I don't think was doing anything very different to what Spec Ops was doing back in, you know, the original Modern Warfare 2. I guess you've got the raid, but the raid really felt like a sort of kind of a Spec Ops mission with an extra couple of puzzles in each one, which wasn't particularly interesting. I don't think that was very successful. I just feel like they're slowly like smooth as they're not stopping innovating, but they're like sanding off the edges. They're making everything a bit more bland, a bit more kind of mushy, which I'm not a big fan of. If COD were to take a massive, Affers said, if COD were to take a massive financial dip, I think they'd try to completely reinvent the game. If it were to go entirely, they would free up an enormous space in the gaming world. Yeah, and I think both of those could be true. Like, my dream situation would be COD basically failing and them taking a step back and saying, okay, we're going to have Raven carry on working on Call of Duty, or, you know, Treyarch carry on working on Call of Duty. Just one of the studios. They're going to make Call of Duty they're going to give them 3 years, so there's a break for Call of Duty, because then everyone will get super excited when it comes back. They're going to take some time away, try and reinvent what it is, and just make a super polished, tight, sort of maybe slightly smaller focus game, but something a bit different. And then the other studios, like Infinity Ward and Raven and Sledgehammer, say like, hey, what would you like to make? You know, imagine if like Treyarch work on Call of Duty. We knew we were getting a new Call of Duty in 3 years, and it was going to be something quite different. It was going to be something a bit special. And then Infinity Ward were given like a Star Wars license, and they were going to make like a new Dark Forces style game, like where he plays a stormtrooper or something. And Raven were going back to their days of like Heretic and Hexen and stuff, and they were going to make some like open world game, like first person shooter with magic. I know Immortals of Avenum is kind of that sort of thing, not open world, but first person shooter magic. And then like Sledgehammer were like, okay, well, we really enjoyed some of the stuff we did with Advanced Warfare and things like that. We're going to make like a mech game. And like they went off and made a mech game. And it's like we had all of these different studios doing super creative, interesting things. But with, you know, some of the tech and some of the experience and the knowledge of Call of Duty behind it. I think like that would be insanely good for me. And then because there'd be like 3 years of no Call of Duty, other studios might make first-person shooters and make something that sort of fits into that, and maybe sort of like surprises us and does something interesting with different groups of people. That would be my dream. Affers then said, COD 2023 price commits war crimes on the moon. We have already had that in Call of Duty. Committing war crimes on the moon has already been a thing involving torture, involving human sacrifice, and destroying the Earth. That happened in a Call of Duty game. We destroyed the Earth from the moon. Midago said, yeah, folks are just going to keep buying it every year. I do like that they've moved to a 2-year title, though. I don't think they have, Midago. I don't think they have moved to a 2-year title. That was something that was like something that got kind of leaked. And then a lot of and then people started talking about it loads and just taking it as like gospel truth. And then Activision came out in their earnings call and were like, oh yeah, we've got a new premium title coming out in 2023, which wasn't what the leak said at all. So now all of those leakers and stuff are just trying to like shift it around and say like, well, this isn't really a proper Call of Duty game and like it's going to be something different and like what we said is still technically true, or they've changed their mind based on this, this, and this. And it's like, you know what leakers always do. Whatever they said, they're like Nostradamus. They'll just say a million things, and then whatever actually happens, they'll just try and like fit that into their like view of what they said happened in the first place. But yeah, I don't think there is a 2-year title. I think there is still a Call of Duty game coming out every year, which I don't know if it matters or not. Sorry, then Affers did correct that and said that. Rob Jelly Gaming said, what 5 things do I want to change for Call of Duty? That's a good question. So 5 things to change for Call of Duty. I would say number 1, reduce the scope. Games don't need 150 players in Battle Royale. They don't need to have like big campaigns with loads of voice acting and fancy animation and stuff like that. They don't need a million guns or anything like that. Just reduce the scope. I would much rather have a polished, really good Call of Duty game where everything about it was solid, rather than these massive sprawling Call of Duty games where nothing really works properly. That would be my my preference. Number 2, kind of related to that, is stop with the whole more is better with guns. I don't think there needs to be that as many guns as there are, because loads of them are basically the same. I don't think there needs to be as many attachments as there are. I think you could cut that down to just have, do you want a suppressor or not? Do you want a scope or not? You know, or maybe different types of scope. I think that makes sense. Do you want to have extended mag or not? That's fine. You don't need to have loads of different versions of the same bloody thing. I just think it makes the game so complicated and it leads to a lot of the balance problems and stuff like that. I just think they should cut that way back and think about what the purpose of each gun is. You know, have you got an assault rifle that's hard hitting and kind of difficult to control? How, you know, maybe a bit slower firing. Have you got an assault rifle that's easy to control but does less damage? Have you got a sniper rifle that makes you move very slowly but is very powerful, and then a sniper rifle that you can move quite quickly with but isn't as strong? Just stuff like that. Stuff where you think of a role. You think of a situation in a game where, hey, this would be a good gun for this, and then you build a gun for that, and then you move on. You don't sort of think, okay, we need like 5 different fast-firing, fast-movement SMGs. I just think it makes it so complicated. It doesn't need to be. So that's my second thing. Less weapons, less attachments. My third thing would be stop trying to make the old games. Like, I don't want to see Shipment again. I don't want to see Nuketown again. I don't want to see Firing Range and Shooting Range. I don't want to see Price and Soap and like Ghost and all those people again. I don't need to keep seeing like the campaign having rehashes of old missions and being like, oh, it's kind of like that old mission you used to like. Just like do something new. Stop remaking the old stuff. Make new things. Like I really get fed up with that. I think it's very, very tedious. Number 4, stop trying to push it as being a competitive game. And this is more of a personal thing, but I think, you know, you get competitive games like Valorant and Counter-Strike, and then you get games that are kind of fun and chaotic, like Battlefield and Call of Duty. I think having a game that's more fun and not quite as obsessed with things like balance and competition would probably be a good thing. But Call of Duty does this weird thing where it tries to straddle a line. It's like, hey, look at these crazy things that are kind of unfair, but they're fun, like kill streaks and stuff. And then is like, but also if you're, you know, only people who are good at this game are really having fun. If you're not good at this game, you're doing it wrong with the way they present like CDL and they have ranked modes and all stuff like that. I just think kind of just move more into it being fun. Have like a bigger focus on like party games and private games and just having a laugh with it, rather than it being all about like kill streaks and win streaks and your kill death ratio and all of that sort of stuff. I just think that stuff, it doesn't. I think it causes a lot of the toxicity that surrounds Call of Duty, which I think is a very bad thing. And then my last thing is go back to fantasy Call of Duties. Stop trying to be the real world. I think the real world stuff, they've shown that they can't handle real world stuff maturely. They've shown that they can't do anything that's kind of has something interesting to say about the real world. You know, they sort of use real world locations and ideas and then never say anything interesting about it anymore. They haven't done since, like, you know, maybe Modern Warfare 2019, but not really. You know, they had an opportunity with Clean House and then they just gave up on it and decided that they weren't going to do anything interesting about that, really. Go back to, like, you know, the crazy fancy things of Advanced Warfare, Ghosts, Infinite Warfare, just doing stuff where it's like a little bit in the future, you know, on a different planet, somewhere like completely fictional, where they just have a bit more freedom to tell an interesting story or to have some interesting weapons or some interesting locations, rather than being tied down to trying to do something that's real. I think it's a real shame that they keep on doing that. I think it's a shame. So those would be my 5 things. So what was that? Use fantasy locations and settings. Stop trying to make the old games. Less guns. Smaller scope. And then I can't remember what the other thing I said was. Something else. I'm sure I said something else interesting. That'll do. The weird part is not really the community just assumed that Activision commenting in thing. Yeah. Yeah, they didn't sell it, Madago. They did not sell. At no point were Activision advertising it. I know there's a lot of times where leakers say something and people are like, Activision promised us this. I've seen a lot of comments in my YouTube videos lately of the people being like, hey, we were promised this and we still haven't got it. I saw one this morning where someone was saying, we were promised all this like stuff in DMZ, that there was going to be all of this different stuff changing and everything like that. I think Westy made a video about it. And then they were like, but they haven't done it. What happened to that? And it's like, they didn't ever promise that. That was leakers. Like, people leaked stuff and like maybe misinterpreted stuff, maybe got stuff wrong, maybe just made stuff up. I don't know. But they said a lot of stuff that didn't happen. And then people are angry about it. It's like, this is one of the many problems with listening to leaks. MD said, yo, Geeky, sorry to interrupt you from Norwich, Norfolk, UK. Yeah, why? That's a weird thing. I've talked about being from Norwich a few times. I'm not from here, actually. I just live here. But yes, that's a weird thing. Don't know where that come from. Why are you saying that? Someone trying to dox me or someone trying to just creep me out by saying that they know where I live. Tia Hit said, not buying this year's title, was happy with the 2-year cycle. DMZ should stay. I would stop playing Battle Royale modes if it went away. Everyone would stop playing Battle Royale modes if it went away. Oh, you'd stop playing Battle Royale modes if DMZ went away. I think that's what you mean. Loved Rebirth a lot. Can't play a Sheikah Battle Royale. It's awful for you. Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of people that aren't happy with the game at the moment. And it's important to remember, there's lots of people that are happy with the game at the moment. Like, it's still super easy to find a game. There's still plenty of people playing the game. Even when we're saying, like, you know, oh, look at the Steam charts. It's like, you know, look how badly it's doing compared to what it was. Still, like, if I load up Steam charts right now, it's still the 8th most played game on Steam. For a game that traditionally wasn't on Steam, you know, with the last few years, with Warzone and everything like that, and everyone saying how terrible it is and stuff like that, it's still the 8th most played game. You know, most people on PC will be playing on Battle.net, and most people will be playing on Xbox and PlayStation, but the 8th most played game, that's insane. It's like, you know, above Destiny 2, which you can't play anywhere else on PC anymore. So it is doing incredibly well, like, as a thing. So there's lots of people that are still enjoying it, lots of people that are still playing it. This whole podcast has been much more of a kind of, wouldn't it be cool if, and that's it. You're from King's Lynn originally. Oh, I know that. I know King's Lynn. I used to go to the Majestic all the time, the cinema in King's Lynn. But yeah. John C said, COD's obviously greedy with their store offerings. Things we wanted for the game were paid for initially. I've still bought a few of them. Would still love to see them actually give us what they're wanting. I think it's a problem with microtransactions. I've been feeling this way for a while now, that for a long while I was kind of like, well, cosmetic microtransactions are fine because I don't care about them. I don't spend money on them. They give me COD points for free. That's why I have the rabbit skin. Speaking of which, I have a giveaway on Twitter right now. If you go over to my Twitter, twitter.com/Geeky Pastimes, you'll see a tweet. I retweeted it this morning, so it should be at the top of my list. I've got a competition where I'm giving away 2,400 COD points codes. I'll just use a Twitter picker to choose the random people who... You have to follow me, like the tweet, and then retweet it. Do all those 3 things. Then 2 people will be picked later today, probably this afternoon. I'll pick some people who will win 2,400 COD points on any platform you want. Doesn't matter, region and stuff like that. So, yes, go check that out. But anyway, yeah, yeah, the microtransactions, I used to think, oh, it's a fine way. They need to make money somehow. They need to fund the development. If this is a way where people who care about cosmetics and are willing to pay for it are funding stuff that I'm playing, sounds good. But I think it's got to the point now where all, you know, exactly what everyone said was going to happen when, like, the horse armor in Oblivion came out, that it's all kind of gone to... You don't get many good rewards in games. Like, you don't get free rewards. Remember the good old days of completing challenges in games and getting cool stuff as a reward? That happens less and less because all of the cool stuff they make, they just sell instead. And I think that's affected the gameplay, and it's affected kind of the way the game works in significant ways. And, you know, everyone complains that DMZ, all the mission rewards are crap, all of the Easter egg rewards are crap. And I think that's directly related to anything cool they make, they want to sell. And importantly, they don't want to give you something for free that's better than the stuff they sell. Like in Call of Duty, imagine if they gave you a really cool operator skin for solving an Easter egg. You know, I know they do it with the nuke skin thing, but then they kind of sold that anyway. But that's really hard to do. Not many people will ever be able to get that. But something like an Easter egg that anyone could do, if they did a cool reward for that, a cool operator skin that was really, really good, then why are you going to buy another operator skin? Because you've got a cool one that you're using, and you can only use one at a time. So that would hurt their sales of other stuff. So yeah, I think the microtransaction stuff kind of sucks now. It's really annoying. MD said, release them all as separate things, i.e. rather than running them all through Modern Warfare. Yeah, I mean, I find it insane that Activision haven't done that yet. I mean, not insane. I understand that it saves them a lot of money if they're only having to make assets once. You know, if you're only having to make skins once and guns once and textures and models and music and all stuff like that once, and you're making the maps and being able to repurpose them, it saves them a huge amount of money. But for a studio as big and as successful as Activision, you know, well, a publisher with as many studios as Activision has, it seems weird to me that we can't just have like Warzone as a thing, and then DMZ as a thing, and then Call of Duty multiplayer as a thing. Like have them as separate games, as Call of Duty Zombies as a thing, and have them just separate, like just not connected. But that would be more expensive for them to develop and more expensive for them to make, so I guess that's why they don't do it. It's like with Blizzard, you know, if you look at Blizzard, imagine if like Diablo and World of Warcraft had to be tied together, that, you know, the Diablo classes had to be the World of Warcraft classes. Like that would suck. That'd be rubbish. Or, you know, StarCraft and World of Warcraft had to be connected. So they were like, oh no, we're not making another StarCraft game. We'll make another Warcraft game because we've already got all the models from World of Warcraft, so we'll do that. Like, that'd be rubbish. Like, it's good that they kept all of their different genres separate. So Blizzard have, like, Overwatch and Diablo and World of Warcraft and Hearthstone, which I know is kind of tied to World of Warcraft, and StarCraft and Heroes of the Storm. And they had all these things that kind of running on different engines or running in different ways and having different like front ends and different models and characters and music and stuff like that. I just thought like that's a much better way of doing stuff. But Activision seemed to be like, the other half of Activision Blizzard seemed to be like, no, let's make everything the same. Like, let's just save as much money as we can and just make everything the same. It's very frustrating. This is the time for a Battlefield Battle Royale. I keep saying the Battlefield Battle Royale was really good. Firestorm was an awesome Battle Royale. I loved it. It just didn't get updated. It only ever had like one update, I think. It's such a shame. I thought Firestorm was spectacular. Just the actual Firestorm itself, having the gas as a wall of fire that destroyed buildings, was incredible. The destruction was amazing. Like, you know, you see a sniper in a building, you can try and take out that sniper with a sniper rifle, or you could get a tank and blow that building up, or you could drop an airstrike on that building, or you could fire a rocket into that building. It was so cool. Absolutely loved it. Just skipping through a couple of things. John C said, good point though, why bother having 20 guns with 40 attachments when 3 are fine and only 2 attachment types are worth trying in most categories? Exactly. Like, nearly everyone always says to me, when you're building guns, because I don't really understand gunsmith that well, people are always like, oh, you know, use the F-Tac Ripper as the foregrip. Use the longest barrel that they have. Use the high velocity rounds. It's like, it was always kind of, each thing, there's a massive long list of attachments and everyone's like, oh yeah, use that one, because that's the good one. It's like, why do we have so many others? And surely that must cause problems elsewhere in the game. I mean, I don't know. I don't know anything about development. Maybe it's super easy for them to make 1 million attachments, but it seems very confusing to me. It makes it like, I'm never going to sit down in Call of Duty and be like, I'm going to experiment with every attachment. If there was like 5 attachments, I would do that. I would be like, hey, I'm going to try out all 5 different attachments, see how they work. But when there's like 50 different attachments, like, I'm not going to do that. That's insane. The number of combinations like probably makes it almost impossible to try out every combination of attachments. There's just too many. Medalgo said, I don't mind a battle pass occasionally since there's no pay map packs. I have 2,400 COD points saved up, good to go. Then they dropped a second tier of Black Cell. Nah, I got the first tier though. Yeah, I mean, and the Black Cell thing is just like made the original. Now it's like, now they make premium microtransactions that make the normal microtransactions that were sort of, you know, reasonably priced, 20 quid for a skin. It's insane. Like, now they've made like those look bad. And it's like, oh, so you were spending £10 every 2 months for the battle pass. Well, you can still do that, but we've only put crap in the battle pass now. Now there's Black Cell, £30, 3 times as much money, or £25, I think, to buy, you know, now the good battle pass. And it's just like the stuff that's in Black Cell is only about as good as stuff that you used to get in the normal battle pass in the past. They've just taken the good stuff out and charged you for like 3 times as much for it. This seems insane. John C said, I mean, let me unlock several ghost skins. If I want to buy a beer can head, then that's fine, but unlock skins compared to buy skins is trash. DMZ has some of the most exciting, unique unlock content. I mean, you say that. I would say in DMZ, in each season, there's been like 1 or 2 things that are worth unlocking. I like the hazardous blueprint. I think that's it. I think that's the only thing I think is worth unlocking. And even that, it's, you know, and it's an M13. I don't really use the M13. DK said, been having more fun playing zombies than multiplayer. That's cool. Dead Island's out this week. Didn't talk about that really. Dead Island 2 comes out this week. Apparently the preload started today. That's exciting. Annoyingly, I'm going to be away when it comes out. It comes out on Friday, and I'm going to be away until Saturday. But on Saturday night, I might be back, or if I might come back Sunday. If we might stay an extra night and go to Disneyland Paris. Not sure. But yeah, so I'll be back sometime next week, and I'll be playing some Dead Island 2 and streaming that. Looking forward to that. DICE did all these things with Battlefield 2042, and everyone hated it and demanded they go back to normal. Did DICE do all these things? I mean, DICE still, like, Battlefield 2042 still has a bunch of guns. It still has operator skins. They actually kind of introduced that, and lots of those microtransactions. It still has way too many players on a map. You know, they did the exact opposite of what I was talking about, like keeping it small and keeping it small and polished. Battlefield 2042 was like, let's make everything bigger, and they made it all terrible. And I would argue the thing that really ruined Battlefield 2042, at least for me, was how janky it was. Just like right from when I played, like the first time I played the technical test all the way up to release, it was just like, you know, animations for things from a long way away didn't really work. Vehicle physics didn't really work. The bot AI didn't really work. The maps were really bad. And a lot of that was due to them being too ambitious, like them trying to do too much stuff and trying to double down on the things that they thought were the things that the community wanted. And I think that it just was a mess. It just wasn't like ready. It failed as a game. It just didn't work. Apparently it's better now. I haven't really played it, but yeah. Yes, I fully agree with this. Stop, rethink Call of Duty and come back in a few years. Yeah, I think that would be really good. Be a bit more creative. Oh god, I'm miles behind. There we go. No, I'm not miles behind. It's not too bad. John C said, I've been a day one Battlefield 2042 player. Enjoyed it, but most changes in content were a day late and $1 short for most. Call of Duty seems on a similar course. Sad, I love both. It's really sad that, like, I remember before Battlefield 2042 came out, just around when we got to, some creators got invited to watch the gameplay reveal trailer. And we watched that and it looked amazing. And it was like, that was coming out. Halo Infinite was coming out. Call of Duty Vanguard was coming out. We were getting a new Warzone map. I was so excited for all of those things. And then they came out and it's like, Halo Infinite's kind of terrible. And, well, you know, the multiplayer was fine, but it was just so few maps and so little content. And the campaign was bad. And there was no Battle Royale, which, like, leakers had been saying, yeah, there's definitely a Battle Royale coming. That didn't happen. And then Battlefield came out, and that was really bad. And, you know, as soon as we got to play it, it was like, oh, this is awful. This is just a bad game. And then Vanguard came out, and it's like, I still thought Vanguard was okay at launch. I liked it. But then that didn't get any support, and, you know, Caldera wasn't as good as people hoped for and stuff. And it was just kind of such a depressing thing. I thought we were going to be in a time, in a year, over the last year, where we were going to be, like, having these 3 amazing games to choose from. I was going to be making content for all 3. I was going to be doing stuff. They were all going to be like competing and bringing out really cool new stuff. And all of them just like had really slow updates, really boring updates. Like stuff was broken for ages. They all felt like worse versions of games that we'd had before. And it was just like, oh, that's very tedious. I like that MD saying, I'm from Kingston originally, which is why I live in Manchester now. That makes sense. I don't go to Kingston anymore. I haven't been there for a long while now. No reason to, really. Andy Smith said, late to partisan, not sure if you mentioned it, but you're absolutely right about the leaker speculation around DMZ. They based a lot of assertions on the campaign mission with the crafting. Yeah, I mean, it's carried on, Andy. I know with Season 2, they were saying lots of stuff that was coming in Season 3. Like, lots of leakers were sort of, like, pushing this idea that, you know, there was going to be this massive overhaul of DMZ in Season 3, and it was going to be all of these new, like, progression methods and new ways of getting missions and stuff. And it was just not, all of it was wrong. I imagine what's happening is someone's data mining and just misreading what they're looking at. They just don't understand it. Because, funnily enough, a lot of leakers are idiots. And it's quite hard to understand the stuff. It's quite hard to work out what it is because a lot of stuff is just stuff that was abandoned or stuff that didn't get used or stuff that might get used in the future. Who knows? Francois said, pay to win is pathetic. Still enjoying DMZ with mates, but doing it solo is a rubbish show. Why not fix all the bugs, then bring forward the paying passes? Yeah, I mean, it would be nice. When people say, why not fix the bugs? I don't think it's as easy as that. I don't think it's simple for them to fix the bugs. I know DMZ is doing something that other games haven't really done on a scale that other games haven't done. I'm sure it's very complicated, but it is very irritating that they keep on adding new stuff that's like not that important. And there's still some like really, really kind of core bugs. The game still crashes a lot. I've like lost so much stuff to crashing. There's still weird desync issues when you hit people with cars and then they go invisible. Which, funnily enough, I saw, I looked at all of that drama. I didn't want to talk about it today very much, but I looked at all that drama with like Mon Warzone and Bad Boy Beeman and that Luke person. And it was funny where like Bad Boy Beeman was like saying like, well, we saw like Luke having this thing where when he shot people who were invisible, what about these other streamers who had players who were invisible? And all the other streamers were times where they'd done that thing that I showed off in a video short a while ago, where if you hit someone with a car, but only just, on your screen they're now dead and they've been run over by the car, and on their screen they're still alive and invisible now, so then they can come around and kill you. That's not the same thing as Ricochet making someone invisible the second you shoot them, which is what happened to that Luke person. But anyway, yeah, I can't be bothered to wade in on that on Twitter. But it was definitely, there's a big difference between players being invisible because of desync and players being invisible because of Ricochet. And it's pretty obvious. Like, if you're driving around and players suddenly go invisible, that's because you ran them over. You might not have noticed you did it, but you did. Andy said, look at the weird AF stickers they gave for the first Building 21 instance. At least you can use a chop skin now. It was super weird. That whole thing, like the DMZ rewards, where it was like you got a load of rewards that were just like little jokes or just nonsense things for like doing a weapon case in Building 21. Why not have 7 rewards that are themed to Building 21? Like, what was the thinking behind that? It's insane. It just definitely feels like it's one of the things why I disagree with Lackey, with Tactical Brit, when he says, oh, loads of things were made for DMZ, and like DMZ's like the lead mode and other things were changed. I don't know if that's exactly what he said, but he was like, the design of DMZ has kind of messed up stuff in Warzone. I genuinely think a lot of DMZ is an afterthought, and like the rewards are a good example of that, where they've clearly been like, hey, we've put this mechanic in where you get 7 rewards. Can we have 7 rewards so we can do it? And they're like, oh yeah, just like look at the stuff that we rejected from bundles, like just use some of that rather than making new stuff for DMZ. It just feels very much like it's kind of tying together the scraps into something that works as an extraction shooter rather than being something like custom made. Anyway, MD said, I go between 2 games and don't really play anything else, whatever COD is current and World of Warcraft. And yeah, and I think that's, I mean, to me, that's a problem that like, there's so many games I want to play all the time, like Final Fantasy 14 and Call of Duty and World of Warcraft and The Division and Destiny and Diablo. There's all of these games that I would love to play all the time, and I just don't have time because they all try to demand so much. So that's why, bringing us back round to the topic of the podcast to finish off, it would be a good thing if Call of Duty died. I would like to be freed up to play other things and have an entire community looking for other fun things to play. I think that would be awesome. But it's not going to happen because Warzone Ranked will come out in like less than a month now, and Call of Duty will blow up again and be absolutely huge. I'm almost certain of it, that Warzone Ranked will be massive. You heard it here first. Anyway, thanks so much for everyone who's been watching. I'll be back again tomorrow at 9 AM. Later today, I'll probably be streaming on Twitch. I want to stream some Disney Speedstorm if they give me access. If not, I might be streaming some like Kerbal Space Program or something. Let's try and go to Mars or Donna or whatever it's called in that game. But thanks so much to everyone who's been watching, and I will see you tomorrow. Goodbye. Boop.